Great. Thanks, Mark. Just checking that you can see the slide on the screen.
Yes, all good.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. And as you said, it's our pleasure today to talk around the success story centred around school community partnerships in Te Kuiti and the Gallagher Recreation Centre, Te Whare Takarangi o Te Kuiti. So this is very much centred around a network approach and an opportunity. So my name, Ko Shane Tukuingua, he's Spaces and Places Manager, Taku Mahi Kia Sport Waikato, so Spaces and Places Manager at Sport Waikato, and fortunate enough to have Helen Beaver alongside me today. Helen, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Jane, good morning, everyone. Helen Beaver, I'm the General Manager for Community Services here at Waitoma District Council. Lovely to see you all.
Fantastic. And Helen's got a deadline of 10 a.m. She's got to leave. She's got international partners today, so don't leave me with curly questions at the end should we go over time. So, okay, next slide. So I'm just going to just try this, should have sound, play a video for the first few minutes around the project.
We're great at the importance of sport. Sport and recreation is our bread and butter at Sport Waikato.
The benefits for physical activity are huge in terms of schooling, so engagement, attendance, achievement, all benefit from physically active kids.
The population of the Waitomo region is about 10,000. We are in the lower decile group in New Zealand, so having facilities that can be accessed is really important.
So our old gym was ageing and not really fit for purpose anymore. It was a 3/4 size gym, which meant it didn't offer the opportunity to play a full-size game or host home fixtures. You have to travel to Hamilton to compete. So 2.5 hours for maybe a 40-minute game. And week in, week out, that takes a toll in terms of students' time. And obviously there's a cost involved to that, which we have to cover.
Through our Sport Waikato-led Waikato Regional Plan, we identified that it was time for us to focus on where is that opportunity to look for fit-for-purpose facilities around sport and recreation.
So the idea was to have a partnership for community in the high school, and we could perhaps build something more suitable for the purpose of our town and that we could all benefit from. The Game On Charitable Trust is a group that's made up representatives of the community, getting the idea off the ground and pulling all the parties together. Sport Waikato, Waitomo District Council, iwi and Te Kuiti High School.
They also did a lot of work working with the school, fundraising, building partnerships with council and with providers, and that was the starter of that community school partnership that developed and resulted in us being able to achieve this.
The model is quite unique. The Ministry of Education is a part owner, the Te Kuiti High School is a part owner, and the council is the majority owner. The council is guaranteeing the sustainability, guaranteeing the operational side of the facility. As to how you would deliver $9 million facility like this, the council put in $1.5 million. All the rest was raised from outside, and so really important we get support from provincial New Zealand, from other players, Sport Waikato, Sport New Zealand, lotteries and so on, to be able to deliver facilities like this.
So the Gallagher Recreation Centre is a very well designed 2-court community school facility.
We have our 2 courts which provide a range of different sporting activities. We have a gymnasium that is very well represented by the community, and then we have what we call the multifunction room that provides for events and for meetings, but also for virtual type training and exercise. There's also a small kitchen and of course our reception area, which is quite nice and roomy.
We have a separate entry on our side, an office here where the PE staff are based. We've got changing facilities. We store all our gear here. It just gives us that distinction between school and community.
What's really good about the sustainability is that you've got use throughout the day by the school, and then after 3 o'clock, community come in and access it. So there's actually continual use throughout the week.
I come to 2 sessions a week. We start off by using the equipment, and then we go in and do aerobics with Jules on the screen. And it's fabulous. We love it. It's a super bunch of women. The oldest in the group's 82, and this helps keep us going. So it's just an amazing facility.
I like to train bodybuilding, so I'll come and do 5 to 6 times a week. Just seeing so many community members sign up, young people, old people, middle-aged, big people, small people, doesn't matter. I use it for futsal. We've got a really awesome tournament that's just getting bigger and bigger each year. We've got teams coming from outside of our region as well, and it's just been really, really good.
So for 2024, there were 70,000 visits to the centre. We had 52,000 people for participation within our courts. The fitness centre, 18,200 people. And then for our multi-purpose room, 200 visits throughout the year.
To have a facility that we can host activities makes a huge difference. We're seeing decreases in antisocial behaviours and increases in the numbers of participants too. Just creates that sort of hub within the town.
To come up here during the day and see the courts full, young people enjoying sport and participation, and then outside of school hours with the community benefiting, it's very special.
It's been a very long process, but to see it and walking in here, I just loved it. I felt so proud. I felt proud of our community.
Fantastic. You can't get a better feeling visiting here and seeing this place and seeing our young people in sport.
It's acknowledging the outstanding people from the Waitomo district, passionate people that never gave in, different sectors coming together. And as we move on now across the Waikato region, we've now got a great example that demonstrates this is the way of the future. It has to be the way of the future.
Okay. Sharing that. Right. Okay, just a real quick summary from myself where this project sat. So as you heard in the video, this was a sub-regional project in our Waikato Regional Active Spaces Plan for some iterations. Regionally, there was themes at the time to take a more network approach, obviously to reduce some of the barriers around participation, focusing centrally on partnerships and optimisation, while focusing on our core spaces and places principles that are in the bottom right-hand side, which should be familiar to you all. As you heard, the video aligned quite nicely with the network approach, centred around an opportunity, being an ageing school gym, to deliver a more fit-for-purpose solution for that community, focused on partnerships and a sustainable model. Just briefly around our regional situation, like the country, we know that there are challenges to participation, centred around the appetite and changes to the way people participate, current funding streams, and the physical strain at a sector and individual level. A survey Sport Waikato completed at the time highlighted that 70% of people were travelling outside of district boundaries, not inside their territorial authority area, to participate and play active recreation sport. That being said, the traditional barriers around time, travel and access still remain strong. There was issues around quality across our sector in the region to meet future needs, and organisations critically couldn't afford to maintain their current assets. What we saw through our survey is that real emergence of school community partnerships with, you can see there, 47% of our schools across the region open to these types of schools community partnerships, and that created a real opportunity around this project. And it aligns actually with the Ministry of Education's design guidelines back in 2022. You can see that statement in the bottom right. Schools are important to their local communities and a central point of the community. So for this, going back to the start, you would have heard, this project in Te Kuiti focused back in 2014. The school recognised that the facility was at the end of its life. It wasn't a full-size court gym. The school has considered the options around partnership, and a feasibility and business case at that time concluded that a partnership approach was the best, based on 4 factors in the bottom right of the screen. One being the need for multi-purpose facilities across the district and wider sub-region. That community, as you heard in the video, we're travelling a long way to the likes of Hamilton for participation opportunities. sectors of the community and the local community were not having access to sport and recreation, and the opportunities around a shared facility and partnership with the council came to the forefront. So over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Shane. Gosh, when you look at that photo, wasn't she a beautiful old beast, the old gym? But I'm now going to jump through to 2017, and this is where our journey really commences in regard to the build of the new stadium. So the Game On Trust was established in 2017, and their role was to see the project through to fruition. So one of the first tasks that the trust sort of focused on was developing a funding program, but also kickstarting a funding campaign. So, with the centre being endorsed in the Waikato Regional Sports Facility Plan as a sub-regional priority project, this really helped with the discussions that the Trust were having with potential funding partners. In 2017, Council's role, at this time, we were just essentially a funding partner. So the Trust came and presented to Council and asked if they would be interested in providing a grant that would contribute towards the capital cost of the project. So Council tested this with the community, and that was through the 2018 long-term plan. And we received a really good response through the submissions, with 67% of the community in support. So once Council received that support from the community, they decided they would include in the budgets the $1.5 million capital grant. But for the Trust, the fundraising, it really was a challenge. But they never gave up, and I honestly just take my hat off to them. So they did have funding committed through some key funding partners, which was really good news. And then the PGF fund came about. And when that was announced, it was seen as a real opportunity for the Trust. And they had a lot of conversations. Those conversations were very positive, and for the Trust, it was almost like a guarantee that the PGF fund would come through. They lodged their application, but unfortunately it was unsuccessful. And this really came as a huge blow for the Trust. They hit a low point, I'd have to say, for probably 3 or 4, maybe even 6 weeks, sort of looking to think, gosh, can we actually achieve this? Can we raise the additional money that's needed to keep this project going? So for them, it took real determination and commitment to pick themselves up and to keep going. Mid-2020, they arrived with $7.5 million of funding raised. So that was really great news. We were back on track. Game On was happening. We were front page news. We had a very, very excited community that we were going to have a stadium that would cater for the school and for the community. So then the Trust, they needed to turn their attention to formalising the agreements with the ministry. So again, the ministry had been involved, of course, right from the beginning when the idea was first put on the table by the principal at the time. When it came to formalising the agreements with the ministry, but also the funding agreements, that was when, I suppose, the next blow really for the Trust came about. And that was in late 2020, where the ministry advised the Trust that they had concerns with the project's viability. The ministry, they really didn't want to enter into a formal agreement with a charitable trust. It was the risk factor that they were concerned about, but also the procurement process that the Trust had followed. So then, thank you, Sport New Zealand. Sport New Zealand came on board to assist. And for the project, this really was a game changer. We'd had a couple of blows along the way. First was with the PGF funding and then with the ministry. So Sport New Zealand came on board. They engaged Steve Bramley from SGL Funding to actually undertake a review of all of the key documents that formed part of the project to date and to make some recommendations. And can I just acknowledge Jamie Delich here. Jamie played a really important role as one of the steering group members, and he was just so lovely to work with. So with our steering group on board, the clock was ticking on timeframes because we had funding agreements that had sort of been rolling as far as timelines. We also had a design build component with Apollo that needed finalisation. Apollo were working with the Trust through all of these different components, but timelines were really starting to to become quite close. So the key for Steve was to bring together a group of some senior representatives, and I've listed the different organisations here, who could work together to formalise some recommendations, but the time frame was short. They literally had to review and recommend within probably about a 3-month time frame. So for Steve and the team, there was a real commitment that was needed. They met regularly, their meetings were long, and they achieved a lot. So a revised business case was prepared, and that was presented to the ministry in 2021. They received the tick from the ministry, and so then the steering group worked with Apollo to negotiate a revised fixed price for the design build contract. So then the next step was for the steering group to actually present the findings through to council. So the steering group proposed, initially it was a revised location, and that was largely due to a better soil profile. We're still on school grounds. It just sort of moved the facility slightly closer to the school buildings. The steering group also recommended that the footprint be reduced by 17%. And the reason for this was purely financial. There is some learnings that come from this, but at the time it was purely financial, and it was a decision that really needed to be made. We had funding in place. We needed to keep moving with these timelines. The ministry, they'd also raised some concerns that the trust had not followed a competitive, robust tender process. So therefore, for the ministry, they wanted to test, was the Apollo price competitive? So the steering group, this was another job for them. They had the documentation independently assessed, and it was confirmed that the building price was very competitive indeed. So that was good news. Some of the additional design changes recommended by the steering group, and that was really to meet ministry requirements, was largely around the cladding. Also, the steering group had to find some additional funding to keep the project on track. So, as I said, they did so much in such a short time frame, and I totally take my hat off to them. Also needed to talk to our funders, so this was the likes of Lotteries, Trust Waikato, Grassroots. All of the funding agreements were with the trust. So if council was going to be playing a role here, because this is where this was going, the grant agreements would need to be novated. So we had to test, or the steering group had to test, would that be possible? Also the financials, so this was the operating financials, they all needed to be reworked, retested, and then independently assessed. And that was undertaken by Deloitte. And again, we achieved the tick. So things were progressing well. So then the next step for the steering group was to make some recommendations through to council. And this was at the August 2021 meeting, where the recommendation was that this would be a shared facility with ownership for council, the Ministry of Education, and the Board of Trustees. And the recommendation from the steering group was that the council take the lead role and the majority share of 65%. But this also meant that council was actually taking on the risk portfolio in regard to the design build and everything that went with it. Apollo, they had confirmed a deadline of 30 September 2021 for finalisation of the design build contract and the fixed price that had been agreed. We couldn't move on this any further. I can remember a meeting with the Chief Executive, the Mayor, and myself with Apollo online, where we negotiated this deadline date, but we knew that this was the final date, so we really had to keep things moving. The steering group recommended a land lease between the parties of no less than 34 years, and the steering group also recommended that the trust be the preferred model for the day-to-day operational delivery of the facility. So council, lots of meetings, lots of workshops, but council agreed, yes, they saw the benefit. There was community support. We knew that this was the only way that this project would proceed, and so council decided, yes, they would take on the lead role. So good news. Good news that the recommendations of the steering group were endorsed. And so then we needed to start working with the ministry to finalise the development agreement and also the property sharing agreement, which just outlines all the terms between the three parties. that was quite a process. You've got two government departments working together. So it was quite a process, but we got there. It did take time, but we got there. And the turning of the sod ceremony took place on the 9th of February. And if I can just recognise the gentleman on the left of the picture here, that is the ex-principal of Te Kuiti High School, and that was a gentleman that first put this idea on the table. So he had the privilege of the turning of the sod, and it was a very special day. But you can see a mask in the background there, so one of our next challenges was looming, this little thing called COVID. So I'll just go to the next slide, Shane. So the challenges, we had COVID, of course, but then we also had weather. And this is just a little bit of a photo of one of the rainy days during construction of our stadium. Apollo lost 32 days construction. I have never seen a winter like it. It started raining and it just felt like it never stopped. So Apollo, full credit, as I said, 32 days of lost construction. They worked day and night to make up the time to meet the deadline date for opening day, and we got there. Some other challenges, COVID, of course, it hit our shores, so this was something that none of us were prepared for, and that did bring some significant challenges in regard to supply chain issues, but also, of course, staff capacity, because this was in the time of isolation. So between the contractor, the subbies, there was a lot of sick leave along the way that we had to work through. We also had one very loud voice in the community. This is a photo of the old basketball stadium that's located in Te Kuiti. We had one loud voice in the community who felt that we didn't need a new stadium. This one would do fine. As I said, it was one voice, but he was a very loud voice. So we had to have constant conversations with this chap just to, I suppose, keep the waters calm and keep the project proceeding without too many hiccups along the way. And also there was discussions in regard to facility management, who should be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the stadium. Would it be the trust who had been involved right from the beginning, or is it a service provider? So this was some discussions with council and with the Game On Trust. I'm just looking at time here. So just quickly showing here one of the other challenges, but it's also an opportunity, and this is relationships and communication. So this is just showing the amount of organisations, groups involved along the way. They all had a part to play. They had all been involved. If we go right back to 2014, they all had a voice, they all had history, they all needed to be heard. So along the way throughout the project, just maintaining these relationships and good comms was just absolutely imperative. But we landed. We landed to stadium opening day, and it was a really, really special day. 11th of February 2023, 9 years on from that original conversation that happened at Te Kuiti High School. The day commenced with a karakia at daybreak and the unveiling of our cultural embellishments. We then had a community breakfast, which was lovely. That was at the Te Kuiti School building, and then reconvened back at the stadium for our formal opening. Matthew Cooper was our MC for the day, and Matthew did a sterling job. He'd been involved with this project right from the get-go, so it was just wonderful to have Matthew there as our MC. We had some great games. The community really enjoyed it. For some of our younger people, they had never seen this sort of calibre of athletes in their local town. So we had the Bay of Waikato, Bay of Plenty Magic, play the Northern Stars for a netball game. Then we had some junior basketball, and then we had the big guys with an invitational NBL team, and they played the New Zealand Army men's. So yeah, it was a very, very special day, one that I'll never forget, to be honest. On the day, we also acknowledged our partners and our sponsors, and our sponsors board is very proudly positioned above the courts at the stadium. And also just noticing here our balls on the walls. So this is the picture to the right. This was a Game On Trust initiative with support from the steering group, where we reached out to the community where they could buy a ball to be placed on the wall with their name on the ball. That actually funded the fit out of our gym. So it was a really great initiative. We had a shortfall. We needed to fit out the stadium, and this is what paid for that. But also for the community, just that buy-in to see their names up on the wall. It was a really great initiative. So just our learnings along the way, largely the time it took to reach agreement. As I said, we had a lot of parties involved, consultation and agreement. It took time, but we landed. Relationships was absolutely key all the way through and still is today. Good legals with expertise in this space. As I said, we had multiple government agencies and the school working together, and also a very strong project working group was absolutely imperative. In regard to the building, the footprint, as I said earlier, was reduced. It needed to be because of the funding, but what this did result in was reduced seating. And this is probably the biggest learning for me, was that with that reduced seating, we now need to bring in portable terrace seating for events, which is not ideal. We're looking at actually purchasing some portable terrace seating that we can roll out. But if there was an opportunity, if you would go back in time, I wouldn't want to lose that seating because it does have an effect. In saying that, we do get by, and the seating that's there for day-to-day use is great, but it's for the bigger events that we find it's a bit of an issue. The multi-function room was also reduced in size. It works, but sometimes it's just slightly on the tight side. Allowing time for that practical completion prior to opening day. She was a real rush, believe me, like to probably midnight before, but we got there. But also, which I think is really good news, is that we do need a bigger car park. But that is a positive learning. Shane, I will hand back to you.
Yeah, and Helen, if you need to slip out, I know you've got to slip out with that deadline at 10, so thank you very much.
I do.
So,
thank you.
hey,
But if there is any questions, I'm happy to reach out to anyone.
Appreciate it. And I'm just going to wrap this up. So in
Thanks,
terms
Shane.
of the
Thanks, everyone.
thanks, Helen. In terms of you heard some of the figures on the video at the start. For a catchment of 10,000 people, it's quite significant in its first year of operation to have 70,000 visits. 52,000 which were participants. You can see there the fitness centre, right? So where Helen talked a lot around the size, obviously being reduced, it wasn't reduced in the fitness area and it wasn't reduced in the court space. Obviously, they were critical to the operation of the stadium and the financial benefit in terms of the returns through the fitness centre as well. And to have 18,000 visits in such a small catchment to the visit centre was crucial. And that was part of Steve Bramley's work as well, was actually assessing what was the models out there in terms of 24-hour gyms. Was there a gym in town? There wasn't. And there was some operators that were keen to explore this. So for such a small town, by bringing a gym into a school site was a bit of a game changer there. And you would have heard 200 bookings. So they range from first aid, mental health seminars, consultation meetings, and a range of community and business meetings as well. The school itself, but also the community, has seen significant growth in the core leagues there. It's a huge basketball community and volleyball. They've just taken off to another level, and the likes of futsal and gymnastics and netball have really emerged on the scene there as well. You'd see on the right-hand side, the reason those logos are still there is because a decision was made to outsource this facility. So it was considered at the time, because of the local community and the role the trust had played to get the stadium running or off the ground, it was better to hand it over to a service provider, in particular one that could operate a health and wellness offering from a fitness centre and a group fitness. And there just wasn't the expertise and the trust to run a stadium to maximise revenue returns. So there is an umbrella approach where Belgravia are the operators and managing the community aspect of it, but there's a stakeholder reference group formed with the groups on the right-hand side still very much in play, and they meet quarterly, all the groups and the stakeholder reference groups alongside Belgravia, where Belgravia would usually do their normal, service report through to council, but they also provide a report through to this group, and this group looks at ways that, or community opportunities around programming and optimisation, but also opportunities around more funding to continue to fund the fit out and the sport equipment for not only the school, but also the community organisation. So it works quite well in terms of a umbrella group, with the core intentions still remaining the same around being community led, but at the same time having a service provider in there. But yeah, still very early days. And I think this is the final video. And what I will do, just probably before I open up to questions, what you would have heard from Helen, there was a 9-year period, but then it really condensed to that, 6 months, 3-month drive time with core deadlines, lotteries funding that needed to be taken up, Apollo project pricing that needed to be, locked down and secured. So I do have to reference, again, it comes down to those organisations having the right people in a steering group, and also reference, like Helen, the work that, Jamie Delich did. I remember coming on board for my first at Sport Waikato, and Jamie said, "Hell, have I got a project for you, Shane?" Because, it had taken up a good chunk of his 6 months or year prior to me coming on board. And, he was having government conversations down in Wellington at the same time regional conversations we're having with the Ministry of Education. So I know that took up a lot of his time, and Sport New Zealand and Jamie were a key player there. So I'm just going to stop my sharing. Great.
Fantastic, Shane. Thanks so much to you and Helen. Really insightful, and perhaps an incredibly successful collaboration and partnership approach between council, school, MOE, Sport Waikato, Sport New Zealand, and funders. So I'm sure there will be a few questions, and we've got time for a couple. So let's go to Simon.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thanks, Shane, for that. That was a fantastic presentation, mate. And I guess for us, we were chatting behind the scenes. It really identifies the complexity and the timeframes of such a partnership, mate. So, that was really well. Good overview for that. Quick couple of questions, if that's all right, mate. The old stadium, was that still in use, or was that decommissioned?
So the old, there's two. The gym one is part of a ministry. The school one's part of a ministry budget, where they had to separately use a different item to remove that school gym facility, and that's still in the works, and I think that should be happening any day now. The other basketball stadium, the Waitomo basketball one that Helen alluded to, the One Loud Voice, council had received a report around seismic issues and the amount of money that was needed to go into that stadium to invest into it at the time. It's still there, but all the leagues have moved across to the Gallagher Recreation Centre now, but that gym has not been decommissioned. But, council did its due diligence around the future of that.
And just the main one from my side, mate, was that design and build. And I know it's, they've come a long way, and I know Apollo do a fantastic job with what they do at the moment. Any sort of learnings, though, in terms of, what the expectations from quality and functionality?
Yeah, I think you heard it there from Helen. Some things got cut, but you go to the facility, there's good amount of storage, good foyer, the plywood in and around the 4 change room facilities is quite robust. What I would say is Apollo probably themselves recognised that the Ministry of Education material requirements was probably not leading to the desired outcome they would have hoped for the project at that time, just, around some of the limitations around Kingspan and other materials and things like that. So I think as a sector, that's something that I know Glenn and the team, the ongoing discussions between Sport New Zealand and the Ministry around opportunities there. So, yeah, there's always learnings, but at the same time, you have to meet the requirements of your core funders, and one of them were the Ministry of Education.
From a functionality point of view, things like condensation and heat and all those type of things, there hasn't been an issue with this one?
No, they did have to change out a natural air vent to make it larger. And I know that there's been other projects across the country where, you know, I think they underspec the natural event that you can see on top of the building there, but they replaced that with a larger system, from my understanding. But functionality, the gym works really well. It's bringing in the revenue. I think there are 300 plus members for such a small community. And, you know, they've got the virtual fitness there as well. So people are coming in all hours of the day.
Yeah. All right. No, thanks, mate. Well done. Great job.
Good questions, Dan. Thank you. We'll go to Zonta.
Thanks, Shane. Just with that MOE challenge and kind of that slowdown point where you brought in Steve Bramley, is there anything you would have done differently to avoid that? Or do you think actually that gave you an opportunity to give greater rigour to the project?
Well, it's certainly created opportunities, Anta, right, to actually bring it forward. I think at the time, you know, this concept's still relatively new out there. So I don't think, to probably your earlier question, we need to go through that same process again now that we've got this stadium across the line, right? So if I think around Matamata Community Hub that we're working on at the moment, we've been able to leverage off the Tekawiti concept to basically speed up the time, and which led to an actual school community partnership over in Matamata with this project. But at the time, there wasn't those projects in those local communities. And now we've got that. I think it would change. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to Angela or Craig.
Kia ora, Jane. We've got some multi-use facilities that are on our radar through our Sportsfield Network plan that we need to deliver in the next 10 years. And there have been some conversations around partnership with schools. So just wondering, do you have any advice on working with MOE after the experience that you've had?
Yeah, so obviously the Ministry of Education have got a large, they'll, you know, in early days, if it's not on their radar or their portfolio, there's probably a lack of interest there because they've got a huge infrastructure portfolio that they've got to deliver about renewals and things like that, right? So you really have to work at that local level around a school community board. So the school boards are vital, and in the conversations we have with the ministry, it was the boards that have tabled this with the ministry that helped the ministry themselves because they saw it was community-led. So a strong community board is good. What I would say, which I'm sure you're across, is just actually working with the boards around the status of their school facilities. Are there any coming up for renewals where there is an opportunity? But, you know, the ministry guidelines are quite rigid in terms of X amount of square metres of space per student role. So it comes down to a student role calculation. And I know that doesn't kick in until Form Year 9, Form 3, right? So anything earlier, junior high schools, the ministry contribution is only for students Form 3 and above, and it's a certain criteria, right? So for Matamata, just quickly, the one we're working on, it's the same size as this. About 800 square metres of that will be ministry owned, and it's based off a school roll calculation.
Okay, we're pretty much at time. So again, huge thank you, Shane, for sharing such an insightful presentation. Really appreciate your time, and we'll send thanks to Helen as well.